One broken-down car, one impossible choice. A single father drowning in accusations he couldn't fight. Exhausted from working double shifts just to keep his daughter out of foster care, driving home through a storm that matched the chaos in his life. Then he saw her, a stranger, standing in the pouring rain beside a luxury car, desperate and alone. He could have kept driving. He should have kept driving. He had every reason to look the other way, but he stopped. He didn't know that one act of kindness would become the most dangerous and miraculous decision of his life. The wipers scraped across the glass in their endless rhythm, and Carter Blake's eyes burned from the double shift he just pulled. Loading trucks, scanning boxes, moving, always moving. Because if he stopped, if he let himself think too long about the trial date circled in red on their kitchen calendar, he'd fall apart. 3 weeks. He had 3 weeks before everything ended. Then he saw it. Hazard lights blinking weakly through the curtain of rain. A red luxury car pulled onto the shoulder of Crescent Road, the kind of vehicle that cost more than he'd make in 5 years. A woman stood beside it, her brown skin glistening with rain, her natural curls plastered against her face as she frantically jabbed at her phone. Carter's foot eased off the gas pedal. His car slowed. "Keep driving," the voice in his head whispered. "You're exhausted. She probably has roadside assistance. Someone with a car like that has insurance, has money, has people who can help." But something about her posture, the way her shoulders shook, whether from cold or frustration he couldn't tell, made his chest tighten. His mother's voice cut through his thoughts, as clear as if she were sitting in the passenger seat. "Character isn't about what you do when things are good, Carter. It's what you do when everything's falling apart." His jaw clenched. Everything was already falling apart. Vincent Crane. The name tasted like acid. 6 months ago, $47,000 had vanished from their small landscaping company's accounts. 6 months ago, Vincent had looked him in the eye and accused him of taking it. 6 months ago, Carter's entire world had collapsed. The worst part? Vincent had been convincing. The doctored financial records, the forged signatures, the fake email trail, all of it pointed to Carter. And Vincent had better lawyers, better connections, better everything. "The evidence looks bad," his court-appointed attorney had told him just last week, Mr. Vega's kind eyes full of sympathy that felt like pity. "I believe you're innocent, Carter, but proving it, that's going to be tough." If convicted, he'd get up to 5 years. 5 years of Sophie growing up without him. 5 years of her being shuffled through foster homes because her mother had walked out when she was 2, leaving nothing but a note that said she wasn't cut out for this life. The thought of 7-year-old Sophie, with her 2 puffs held by bright barrettes and her habit of putting her shoes on the wrong feet, alone in the system. Carter's car rolled to a stop behind the red sedan. The rain hit him like a wall the moment he stepped out, instantly soaking through his already damp clothes. He raised one hand as he approached, making sure she could see him clearly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. The woman turned, and even through the rain, he could see her body tense. Her deep brown eyes assessed him carefully, fear and caution warring across her features. "Ma'am," he called out, staying several feet back, making sure both hands were visible. "You okay? Car trouble?" She hesitated, studying him. Water streamed down her face, her clothes completely soaked. Then, as if making a decision, she nodded. "It just died. Won't turn over at all." Her voice was steady despite the situation. Controlled, professional, the kind of voice that was used to being heard, to commanding respect. "Mind if I take a look?" Carter asked. "I'm not a mechanic, but I've kept enough old cars running to maybe help." Another pause, then, "Please, I'd appreciate it." She popped the hood, and Carter stepped forward. The rain pelted the back of his neck as he leaned over the engine, and for a moment, he was grateful for the distraction. This problem he could maybe fix. This problem didn't involve lawyers and courtrooms and the terrified look in his daughter's eyes. His fingers traced along wires and connections, and within minutes he'd found it. Your battery terminal's loose, he called over the sound of the rain. Probably got jarred by a pothole. You got any tools? No, I don't think so. Carter jogged back to his sedan, water streaming down his face, and grabbed his toolkit from the trunk. As he worked, tightening the connection and cleaning the corrosion from the terminal with the edge of an old rag, he found himself talking, filling the silence the way he did when Sophie couldn't sleep. This battery's on its last legs, he said, his fingers working despite the cold. You should get a new one soon. There's a gas station about 2 miles up the road. They'll have them. He could feel her watching him. Even in the rain and darkness, he registered her face, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the way she carried herself with quiet authority despite being stranded and soaked. Her hair, though wet, showed the careful maintenance of someone who took pride in her appearance. She was the kind of woman who commanded rooms, he could tell. The connection clicked into place, and Carter straightened, wiping rain from his eyes. Try it now. She slid into the driver's seat, her honey-toned skin illuminated briefly by the interior light, and turned the key. The engine roared to life. The relief on her face was immediate, genuine, transforming her features. How much do I owe you? She was already reaching for her purse. Carter shook his head, backing toward his car. Just glad I could help. Ma'am. Wait. At least tell me your name so I can thank you properly. He turned back, rain streaming down his face, and for a moment their eyes met fully. He saw gratitude there, and something else, a kind of respect, like she was seeing something in him that most people missed. Carter, he said. Then, because he was too tired to be cautious, because the trial was 3 weeks away and nothing mattered anymore. Carter Blake. Thank you, Carter Blake, she said, her voice warm despite the cold. You might just have saved my night. If only you knew, he thought, climbing back into his car. If only you knew you might just have been helped by a man the world thinks is a thief. He pulled away, watching her hazard lights disappear in his rearview mirror. He'd never asked her name. In 3 weeks, none of this would matter anyway. He was wrong about that. 3 weeks later, Carter sat in Brookstone County Criminal Court, his cheap suit borrowed from Mr. Vega because he couldn't afford to buy one. His hands were clammy, his heart racing so fast he thought he might pass out. This was it, the moment that would decide whether he got to tuck Sophie in tonight or whether he'd spend the next 5 years watching her grow up through prison glass. Mr. Vega sat beside him, his salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, organizing papers with practiced efficiency. But Carter could see the worry in his attorney's eyes. They both knew how this looked. They both knew what happened to people like Carter when they went up against people like Vincent. All rise for the Honorable Judge Alina Hayes, the bailiff announced. Carter stood on shaking legs, his eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't bring himself to look up, couldn't bear to see the face of the person who held his entire future in their hands. But then something made him glance up. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fate. The judge entered, black robes flowing, her posture commanding and authoritative as she took her seat behind the bench. Her locks were styled in an elegant updo, her dark skin radiant even under the harsh courtroom lights. Carter's breath caught in his throat. Wait. He knew that face. Those eyes, that way of carrying herself with quiet authority. His mind flashed back to the rainy night, the woman beside the red car, the gratitude in her eyes when he'd fixed her battery terminal. No, it couldn't be. But the more he stared, the more certain he became, and the more impossible it seemed. The woman he'd helped 3 weeks ago was now sitting behind that bench, holding a gavel that would determine his fate. His heart hammered in his chest. Was he imagining this? The lighting was different now, harsh fluorescent instead of darkness and rain. She was in formal robes instead of soaked clothes. Her locks were styled professionally instead of wet curls around her face. Maybe he was wrong, but those eyes, the shape of her face, the way she held herself. Carter's hands gripped the edge of the table. He wanted to say something, to ask, to confirm. But how could he? He glanced at Mr. Vega, but his attorney was focused on his notes, completely unaware of the storm raging inside Carter's head. The judge, Judge Hayes, the bailiff had said, was looking down at the case file, her expression neutral and professional. If she recognized him, she gave no sign of it. Not a flicker of acknowledgement, not a hint of familiarity. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe he was losing his mind. The proceedings began, and Carter tried to focus, tried to listen to the prosecutor's opening statements and Mr. Vega's responses, but his mind kept returning to that face behind the bench. It looked like her. It really looked like her. Throughout the hearing, Carter found himself stealing glances at Judge Hayes, trying to be certain, trying to reconcile the desperate woman in the rain with this stern figure of authority. Then something happened that made his heart stop. The prosecutor was presenting the photocopied financial documents, and Judge Hayes leaned forward, her eyes sharp as she examined them. "Mr. Trent, these are photocopies. Where are the originals?" Carter's breath caught. It was her. It had to be her. But she never looked at him, never gave any sign that she knew who he was. Her face remained perfectly neutral, perfectly professional, as she questioned the prosecutor about the evidence. "I have concerns about these documents," she said firmly. "This court will not proceed based on photocopies of photocopies. Mr. Vega, I'm granting your motion for forensic examination. We'll reconvene when we have properly authenticated documents." The gavel came down with a sharp crack, and Carter flinched. As the courtroom began to clear, Carter remained seated, his mind reeling. Mr. Vega was talking beside him, explaining what had just happened, how unusual it was, how lucky they were. But Carter barely heard him. His eyes were on Judge Hayes as she gathered her files and disappeared into her chambers. Was it her? Had the woman he'd helped in the rain just saved him right back? Or was his desperate mind playing tricks on him, creating hope where there was none? Alina Hayes leaned against her chamber's door, her hands trembling as she pressed them flat against the wood. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning with the magnitude of what had just happened. Carter Blake, the man who'd stopped in the pouring rain to help her, the man who'd refused payment and smiled wearily and told her his name before disappearing into the night. She'd seen the recognition in his eyes when she'd entered the courtroom, watched him do a double take, watched confusion and hope and uncertainty flash across his handsome features. He suspected, but he wasn't sure, and she'd given him no confirmation, kept her face perfectly neutral, because to acknowledge it, to show any sign that she knew him, would be grounds for immediate recusal. And if she recused herself, this case would go to Judge Laird. Alina pressed her fingers to her temples. She'd just bent every ethical rule in the book. She'd used her position to demand evidence examination that should have been done months ago. She'd fought for a defendant she had personal contact with. But what choice did she have? Let an innocent man go to prison because the system was too lazy to do its job properly. She'd seen the evidence, seen how flimsy it was, how circumstantial, how easily it could be torn apart with proper examination. But Judge Price had been too busy to care, had denied the forensic examination because it cost money and time. Carter Blake was being railroaded, and the only person who could stop it was someone who should have recused herself the moment she'd seen his name. Sometimes justice required impossible choices. She just hoped she was making the right one. 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Carter went through the motions, working at the warehouse, picking up Sophie from Mrs. Lopez, reading bedtime stories, pretending everything was fine. But every night he lay awake, wondering, was it her? Had she recognized him? "Daddy, you're thinking too loud," Sophie mumbled one night, half asleep, her brown hand clutching her stuffed rabbit. "It's keeping me awake." "Sorry, baby girl, go back to sleep." "Is it the court thing?" "Yeah. Mrs. Lopez says judges are fair, says they help good people." "I hope so, Sophie. I really hope so." The forensic accountant's report arrived on Tuesday. Mr. Vega called Carter at work, his voice shaking with emotion. "Carter, the report, It's everything we needed. Vincent fabricated everything. The digital records prove it. You're going to be okay." Carter's legs gave out. He sat down hard on a stack of boxes, phone pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face. "We're going back to court tomorrow. Judge Hayes wants to reconvene immediately." Judge Hayes. Was it her? Maybe tomorrow he'd know for sure. After careful examination of the evidence, Judge Hayes said from the bench, her voice carrying absolute authority, "This court finds that the prosecution's case is built on fraudulent documents. The digital banking records conclusively demonstrate that Vincent Crane, not Carter Blake, committed the embezzlement in question. Mr. Blake, all charges against you are hereby dismissed with prejudice." The courtroom erupted in noise, but Carter heard none of it. His hands were shaking, his vision blurring with tears he couldn't control. Free. He was free. "Furthermore," Judge Hayes continued, her voice cutting through the chaos, "I'm referring this case to the district attorney with a strong recommendation that charges be filed immediately against Vincent Crane for fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and obstruction of justice." The gavel came down with finality. Carter looked up at her, then really looked at her, and their eyes met for just a fraction of a second. And in that moment, he knew. It was her. It had always been her. She'd known who he was from the moment his case crossed her desk, and she'd fought for him anyway. But before he could say anything, before he could even process what he wanted to say, she was standing, gathering her files, disappearing into her chambers with the same professional efficiency she'd shown throughout the trial. 6 weeks passed like a dream. Carter found a better job at a hardware store. Better pay, better hours, benefits that actually meant something. He was home for dinner every night. Sophie drew pictures of Daddy being free that covered their refrigerator in rainbows and misspelled words. Life was good, better than he'd ever imagined it could be after everything that had happened. But something nagged at him. He'd never gotten to properly thank the judge, never gotten to confirm what he knew in his heart to be true, that she was the woman from the rain, that she'd recognized him, that she'd risked everything to save him. He was restocking shelves in aisle 7, automotive supplies, which felt appropriate given how this whole thing started, when a voice behind him said, "Excuse me, do you know where I might find battery terminals?" Carter turned, and there she was. Not in judge's robes this time, not behind a bench with a gavel in her hand. Just a woman in jeans and a casual sweater, her locks flowing freely over her shoulders, standing in the hardware store with a slight smile on her face. "It's you," he breathed, the box of windshield wipers slipping from his hands. "I knew it in the courtroom. I wasn't sure, but I knew." Her smile widened, warmer now, more genuine. "You recognized me. How could I not? Your face, your voice. But I kept thinking, maybe I was imagining it. Maybe my mind was playing tricks because I was desperate." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "You knew, too. The whole time. You knew I was the guy who fixed your car. From the moment I saw your photo in the case file, the coffee mug I was holding hit the floor and shattered. But you couldn't say anything. If I'd acknowledged it, I would have had to recuse myself. Your case would have gone to Judge Laird." Carter closed his eyes, understanding washing over him. "And Judge Laird would have convicted me. Almost certainly. He has a 94% conviction rate and no patience for public defenders." "So you risked everything." Carter's voice was barely a whisper. "Your career, your reputation." "I could lose my position if anyone found out," Alina said quietly. "I broke about a dozen ethical guidelines, but I'd do it again." They stood in the middle of the hardware store, surrounded by mundane things, screws and paint cans and extension cords, and the moment felt sacred. "Why?" Carter asked. "Why would you risk so much for someone you met once in the rain?" "Because that one meeting told me everything I needed to know about your character. A man who stops in the pouring rain to, help a stranger using his own duct-taped tools, refusing payment when he clearly needs it. That's not someone who steals from others. That's someone with integrity. And I couldn't watch an innocent man go to prison just because the system was too lazy to look at the real evidence. Carter felt tears sting his eyes. You saved my life, saved my daughter from losing her father. You helped me first, Alina said softly. You had every reason to keep driving that night. You were exhausted, worried, probably running through worst-case scenarios about your trial. But you stopped anyway. I never even learned your name that night. I know. I realized that later. You gave me yours, Carter Blake. But you never asked mine, and I never offered it. There's something else, Alina said, a smile playing at her lips. During your trial, you brought your daughter to court once. She had to wait in the hallway while we were in session. Carter nodded. Sophie, Mrs. Lopez was sick that day and I had no one else to watch her. She drew me a picture, gave it to the bailiff to give to me. Alina's smile widened. A judge with a superhero cape. She told him I had a magic hammer that made bad people go away. Despite everything, the weight of the conversation, the emotion churning in his chest, Carter laughed. She thinks your gavel is magic. She's been telling everyone at school about how the nice lady with the magic hammer saved her daddy. I'd love to see more of her drawings. Then, with visible courage, with vulnerability showing through her professional composure. Maybe over coffee, if that's allowed now that the case is over. Carter felt his heart surge with something complicated, something that felt like hope and gratitude, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected. It's allowed, he said, his voice thick with emotion. In fact, I'd really like that. I'd really like that a lot. That Saturday, Carter brought Sophie to the cafe. He'd explained that Miss Alina wanted to see her drawings, and his daughter had spent the entire morning organizing her artwork and changing her outfit 4 times. Is she the magic hammer lady? Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes, her 2 puffs bouncing with her. She is. Is she pretty? Very. Is she nice? The nicest. Then I'm wearing my princess dress, the yellow one, because yellow is happy and we are happy now, right, Daddy? Carter had knelt down, eye level with his daughter, his heart so full it ached. We're the happiest baby girl. Now, watching Sophie spot Alina across the cafe and practically vibrate with excitement, he felt something shift inside him, something that felt like coming home. Daddy, Daddy, it's the magic hammer lady, Sophie squealed, dragging him forward. Alina stood, and Carter watched her face transform as Sophie barreled toward her. All the professional composure melted away, replaced with genuine warmth and delight. Hi, I'm Sophie, but you can call me Sophie because that's what Daddy calls me, and I'm being very good today. The words tumbled out in one breathless rush as Sophie thrust a rolled-up piece of paper at Alina. See, that's you with your magic hammer, and that's the cape, because superheroes need capes, obviously. Obviously, Alina agreed, unrolling the drawing with genuine care, her eyes softening as she studied the crayon artwork. This is beautiful, Sophie. I know, Sophie said with zero modesty, already climbing into the chair across from Alina. I'm really good at art, and also at eating pancakes. Do they have pancakes here? Over hot chocolate for Sophie and coffee for the adults, the conversation flowed with surprising ease. Sophie entertained them with elaborate stories about her stuffed animals' adventures, complete with different voices and dramatic hand gestures. Are you going to be Daddy's girlfriend? Sophie asked suddenly, her brown eyes wide and innocent. Because Mrs. Lopez says you're pretty, and Daddy needs a girlfriend because he's been mopey for too long. Sophie! Carter's face burned with embarrassment. What? Mrs. Lopez said it, not me. But I agree. You are pretty, and you have a magic hammer. That's basically the best combination ever. Alina tried not to laugh at Carter's mortification, her eyes dancing with amusement. Well, your dad and I are going to be friends first, and we'll see what happens. Okay, but just so you know, I'm really good at sharing Daddy, and I make excellent friendship bracelets. As Sophie launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her bracelet-making technique, Carter caught Alina's eye across the table. She was smiling at him with something warm and knowing, and he realized this felt natural, easy, like maybe they'd been heading toward this moment since that rainy night when their worlds first collided. The coffee dates became a regular thing, sometimes with Sophie, sometimes without, but always filled with laughter and easy conversation that surprised them both. On their fourth outing, a trip to the zoo with Sophie, they stood watching the penguins waddle across their enclosure. Sophie had run ahead to the sea lions, her yellow jacket bright against the gray winter day. "Daddy, hold Miss Alina's hand so she doesn't get lost," Sophie called back. I don't think—" Carter started, embarrassed. "It's okay," Alina said softly, slipping her hand into his. Her fingers were warm despite the cold air. "For safety reasons." "Right. Safety," Carter agreed, his heart hammering. Her hand fit perfectly in his, like it belonged there. By month 3, they'd started having occasional dinners alone while Mrs. Lopez watched Sophie. Real dates where they could talk about hopes and fears without interruption. One evening, after a particularly lovely dinner, Carter walked Alina to her car. The red sedan had a new battery now. "Can I tell you something?" Alina asked, leaning against her car. "Something I probably shouldn't say because it's too soon." "You can tell me anything." "When I saw your name on that docket, when I realized who you were, I was terrified. Not because of the ethical implications, though those were very real, but because, in that one interaction on Crescent Road, you'd shown me something I'd stopped believing existed in this world." "What's that?" "Goodness. Real, uncomplicated human goodness. You had every reason to keep driving that night. You were exhausted, worried, facing trial in 3 weeks. But you stopped anyway." Carter felt his eyes sting with unexpected emotion. "You risked everything for me." "I risked my career," Alina corrected gently. "You would have risked your daughter. Those aren't equivalent scales." He kissed her then, soft and careful and full of promise. 1 year and 3 months after the trial that almost destroyed his life, Carter was planning to propose. He'd picked out a ring, nothing fancy, because fancy wasn't their style, but something that sparkled the way Alina's eyes did when she laughed. He'd planned an elaborate sunset proposal at the park. Everything was planned perfectly, except he'd made one crucial miscalculation. Sophie could not keep a secret to save her life. They were at the park when Sophie, who was supposed to be at Mrs. Lopez's, suddenly appeared from behind a tree and shouted, "Are you going to ask her to marry us yet? The ring is burning a hole in your pocket, Daddy." Alina's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes going wide with shock and delight. Carter glared at his daughter, who was bouncing up and down with zero remorse. "Sophie, you were supposed to be at Mrs. Lopez's. Mrs. Lopez and I decided I should be here for the important moment." Several people in the park had turned to look at them now, but Alina was laughing and crying at the same time, and when he looked at her, she nodded. So he got down on one knee right there, with his 8-year-old daughter bouncing excitedly beside him. "Alina Hayes," he said, pulling the ring box from his pocket with shaking hands. "You saved my life in more ways than one. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when the world didn't. You've made us a family. Will you marry us? Say yes! Say yes!" Sophie jumped up and down. Alina was fully crying now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes to both of you, forever and ever." Sophie launched herself at Alina, nearly knocking her over. "I knew it! I told Daddy you'd say yes." The wedding was planned for the following spring. Sophie took her role as flower girl very seriously. The wedding day arrived with perfect spring weather. The garden venue was decorated simply. White chairs, soft flowers, sunlight filtering through trees. Mrs. Lopez wept openly throughout the ceremony. Mr. Vega served as best man. Carla, Alina's clerk, served as maid of honor and spent half the ceremony crying happy tears. Sophie, now 8.5, stood as flower girl in her yellow dress. She'd practiced her walk down the aisle at least 40 times, but when the moment came, she skipped instead. "Skipping is more joyful," she explained later. "This is a joyful day. During the ceremony, when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Sophie stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, "If anyone says anything, I'll fight them. I took a karate class." The guests erupted in laughter. When it came time for Sophie to present the rings, she announced to the assembled guests, "Just so you all know, I set them up. I'm basically a professional matchmaker." The vows themselves were simple but profound. Carter promised to always stop for strangers in the rain, to be the father Sophie deserved and the husband Alina had never thought she'd find. Alina promised to always fight for justice even when it was hard, to use her magic hammer wisely, to embrace the beautiful chaos that came with loving a tornado in an 8-year-old body. As they exchanged rings, Sophie whispered to Mrs. Lopez, "This is the best thing I ever did." During the reception, Sophie took her self-appointed job as party coordinator very seriously. She taught Carla how to do the floss dance and ensured everyone knew the full origin story of her parents' relationship. So basically, Daddy fixed her car in the rain because he's nice. Then she used her magic hammer to save him from the bad guy because she's awesome. Then I drew a picture because I'm artistic. Then they fell in love because obviously they should. Then I told them to get married because I'm smart. And now we're a family. As Carter and Alina shared their first dance, she whispered against his shoulder, "I broke so many ethical guidelines for you. Was it worth it?" She looked over at Sophie, who was now attempting to teach the very serious Mr. Vega how to do the worm on the dance floor, then back at the man who'd stopped to help her on the worst night she'd had in years. "Every single violation," she said, and kissed him. Later, during what was supposed to be the father-daughter dance but became a family dance, Sophie looked up at both of them with unusual seriousness. "I'm really happy, like the happiest I've ever been in my whole entire life." "Me too, baby girl," Carter said, his voice thick with emotion. "Me three," Alina added, pulling them both closer. "Good, because now I have a mom who can teach me about the law and a dad who can teach me about fixing cars, and I'll be basically unstoppable. Also, can we get a dog now?" "We'll talk about it," both parents said in unison. "That's parent talk for maybe yes. I'm totally wearing you both down." Sometimes we think we know how our story will end. Carter had believed his would end in a courtroom with a gavel coming down to seal his fate. He'd believed in a world where character didn't matter, where the system crushed people like him without mercy. But he'd been wrong about all of it. Vincent Crane was serving 5 years for fraud and embezzlement. Justice had been served, even if it had taken an unconventional path to get there. And Alina had learned that sometimes the greatest judgment you can make is choosing to follow your heart, even when it means bending rules that were written without room for mercy. As for Sophie, she gained a mother who taught her that being strong and being kind weren't mutually exclusive, who showed her that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is believe in someone when the world doesn't. The three of them, a father who believed in helping strangers, a judge who believed in justice over blind rule following, and a little girl who believed in magic hammers, became the family none of them had known they were searching for. And that makes all the difference in the world. If this story reminded you that kindness always comes back to you in unexpected ways, hit that subscribe button. What's the kindest thing a stranger ever did for you? Tell us in the comments below. Because we all have the power to stop in the rain. We all have magic hammers if we're brave enough to use them for good.